1, 2, 3, go.
Okay, so I'd like to get us started here on February 14th and to welcome everybody here to the monthly board member for the Yellow Springs Board of Education. And a particular welcome on this night because, of course, nothing says romance like being at a school board meeting here on Valentine's Day.
You betcha.
The purpose of the meeting, of course, is to do the necessary and indeed legally required business that the board has to do each month. We always reserve a portion of our meeting for community comments. We're delighted to hear from people with the caveat that those comments need to be held to 3 minutes so that everybody has a chance to speak and that the board can get on with the agenda as well. I'll invite persons present to make sure that they have signed up on our sign-up sheet so that we have a record that you came to visit. We're not going to call the roll because the board has been in executive session starting at 6 p.m. this evening, and so we'll proceed with the preliminary matters 1.3 and the approval of the minutes from the January 10th board meeting, which also included our annual organizational meeting. Could I have a motion, please?
I'll move.
Second.
Do we have any amendments, edits? Okay, call the roll, please.
Sylvia,
Yes.
Steve McQueen,
Yes.
TJ,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Aida.
Yes.
Good. And again, welcome to all of those who are here this evening. Items 2.1, I want to acknowledge that we have 2 letters that came to the board this month, and they're available. And now what I'd like to do, 2.2, is to invite anybody who'd like to come and address the board. So, do we have anybody here? Anybody else?
Thank you. I got used to saying Madam President.
It's okay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm comfortable in my masculinity. It's all right.
My name's Eli Hurwitz. I'm the president of the YSEA, the Teachers Union, and I'm here on behalf of the Yellow Springs Education Association. First, I would like to thank the board for being open to moving the negotiation dates. You have some of our initial dates, but I'm going to definitely get you more dates that we have available for negotiations. So thank you very much for your willingness to do that. It's, the world happens. I also want to take a little bit of time to thank our teachers for quite a few things. Brian Mayer, with the help of Mr. Hatter and Miss Materney, Carly Materney, took a lot of our students on a trip to Chicago to be exposed to kind of a multi-level experience level concert band at a high school like theirs, and to kind of to play with people like them, as well as see what a Windy City looks like when it's not quite as cold as it's been. I'd like to thank Kate Lohmeyer and Lori Sparanap for kicking off a health project this week around suicide awareness. They showed around a lot of different issues in health, but they showed another showing of Girls Like That to our students, and are really looking at taking that out, taking our students out to the community to really start a discussion about how we treat each other and how we treat ourselves. I'd like to thank Kate Lohmeyer again and Shannon Morano for putting together the Day of Empowerment at our school. The Day of Empowerment's been going on for a while now, and they've put a lot of extra time into it. It rolled down here to the elementary this year, but Miss Nickel led a discussion as an example with our Gay Straight Alliance, and just the ability for students to open up in that discussion about themselves and about the issues they're facing is a testament to how powerful the day could be and was. I'd love to thank the Mills Lawn specialist teachers and the 4 to 6 teachers for bringing the same energy and activity here. Mr. Houch as well. Kevin Leidy is taking a bunch of students with a grant that Mario sent around to the University of Cincinnati. It's an amazing opportunity. and they're doing a lot of really wonderful work. This weekend, Dave Smith is going and meeting with people from the Bomani School in Rwanda to kind of bring them. So my time?
Well, yeah.
Well, fair enough. No, thank you very much. We had quite a bit. So
Yeah.
It's a very active since the new year. So.
Chicago in the wintertime is.
Chicago in the wintertime.
That takes
Thank you.
fortitude. Thank you, Eli. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board, please? And again, identify yourself for the camera.
I'm Daniel Belzell, and I have two issues. The first one is I'm going to investigate what innovation means in general and in specific for our schools. And the second one is we need to reduce the number of tests that we have in the schools, and we're going to identify these tests, and I'll see what I can do about them when I get them identified.
Okay. Thanks very much. Is there anyone else? Okay then. So do we have a schools in action report tonight, 2.3? We do not. Okay.
We need to get one of those probably next
Yes,
week.
we should, because when the, it was fantastic when the speech and debate crew was
Let's get
in.
those tennis shoes in here.
Yeah, exactly.
So this basketball season's over.
Will they smell at that point?
Whole experience.
That's right. So let's move on to 2.4, administrative reports, and Mr. Hausch, I'm gonna ask you to go on first.
I will definitely step up to the challenge. So it's been a really awesome week at Mills Lawn, really busy. Started, probably the main event was our Day of Discovery, which Eli mentioned. It's kind of the Mills Lawn version of the Day of Empowerment, and kind of intentionally, named it and brought some student voice and choice into that to, kind of have a similar approach, but more cut out for elementary school students. And it was amazing. It was a great day. We have a lot of survey feedback that we've been going through, and kids overwhelmingly enjoyed the day, learned from it, had some really nice comments about the opportunities that they received that day. And it couldn't have happened without tons of collaboration and participation across the 4th, 5th, 6th grade teams, the specialists. Jack came down, Kate Lohmeyer, Shannon Morano, the Spidey group from the high school. So it was just we had grants that came in from the Human Relations Commission and the PTO. So just a lot of partnerships to make it happen. And it was great. It was awesome. It was super busy, running around like crazy all day, trying to just make sure that the organization was set, and it was very successful. So that was great. The first time we'd been able to approach it that way, to kind of move it into the daytime rather than the boys and girls nights outs that we've done in the past. So I felt really good about that. Some other things, we've been focused on social emotional learning. The Day of Discovery was a huge SEL event for students and teachers. I mean, that was a really big piece of what we did this year in terms of meeting goals around that. But we're also talking as a staff and really investigating what we currently do, what we do well, what we don't do well, what we need to supplement in terms of our approach to support students' social and emotional needs, which are huge and important and necessary part of them being successful in school and life. So that's been a really nice journey for us this year as well. And then also, over the past couple of weeks, I've been meeting with all of our teachers and reviewing PBL goals, and that's a great opportunity to just kind of get on the same page and learn about some things that are going on in classrooms that I might know about or not, or have a general knowledge of, but then I get the real deal from the teacher directly, and lots of in-depth conversations about the work that students are doing, growth that they're making academically with the PBL model, and just really impressive. I mean, it's we're at a nice depth with this work now, where we can really talk about pretty intricate details of planning and assessment and just student experience. So that was refreshing, but with our school cancellations and delays, all these meetings across 2 weeks kind of got shoved into 1 week. So we've been running pretty hard in the past couple of weeks, but things are going well.
Can I just ask a
Sure,
quick
please.
question? I noticed earlier this week what you put out on the message board,
Yes,
and so is.
I should highlight that for sure.
And I have a particular thing I wanted to toss at you.
Okay, sure.
Well, I'm not sure if you were aware or not that the Columbus Museum of Art did this truly spectacular exhibit.
Yes.
Okay.
So just to give background on that, we,
Sorry,
so-
the message board asks the question, do you know what the Harlem Renaissance is?
Right.
And so,
and we, at Mills Lawn, Black History Month is really, a huge, event and series of learning activities and opportunities for kids. And what we try to do is really make sure that it's stretching across the whole month. And we also always every year talk about like how it's not just a month, and we need to teach history, in a really comprehensive way. But it's important to our staff and our students to make sure that we, do a lot of significant learning during Black History Month. So there's a committee of teachers who've taken it on for the past couple of years, and the idea was instead of just a broad, landscape, why not focus on a specific time period and start to do it that way so that we can, really highlight what happened at a time in history. So because of the exhibit in Columbus that Jody Pettiford and Joe Franny Riker went and saw last month, they were inspired to pursue the Harlem Renaissance. So that then led to a building-wide commitment to presenting different historical figures from arts and sports and thought from that time period on the morning news. So every classroom is presenting as a person every day on the morning news. There's a big assembly at the end of the month. There's just a lot of learning that's wrapped around the Harlem Renaissance. So that's the point of the message out there, just to try to kind of trigger some
Great.
thought or understanding
Nice.
about that. Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Good. Yeah.
Did the kids go to the exhibit or just the teachers?
The teachers did, and what my understanding is that the exhibit is
The exhibit closed.
Fine,
Yeah, it closed middle of January.
Right.
Which was too bad because that was also in the midst of all the bad weather.
right.
But I also wonder if their education department doesn't have a road show worked up that they might be able to bring out. I don't know, but it might be worth a
Yeah.
phone call.
Yeah. So that's been a cool thing that's also been going on from December through now, the planning, and a group of about 7 or 8 teachers that get together every week and talk about, just what we're doing and how we can move through the month really intentionally. So it's been awesome. It's been great.
Back to the discovery, just, is there any intention of having that at night again? Because Jada was rather upset that they didn't have a night version. I guess a lot of the kids were looking forward.
Because they like
to-
coming
yeah.
out at night.
Right, and so that was
Right.
like, they knew about the tradition of that, and so he enjoyed it, but he also was like, are they gonna do that again?
Yeah.
I couldn't answer, but.
I mean, the short answer is no, not right
Right, that's
now,
what
but
I
like
told
knowing
them.
that makes me think about what we could do, that might be a little different, but also offer an opportunity for kids to
Right.
come out and hang out at night.
They really
It
like
is
that.
fun. It's a lot of.
I went last year.
Yeah.
So I think that's what he remembered, was
Right.
that I was at the last one. So
Yeah.
I think he was looking forward to
Yeah.
Yeah.
another one. And so I just brought it up. I was wondering if there
Yeah.
was.
I'll talk to Jason about it.
Yeah.
We'll come up with something.
Right, exactly. And also, when it doesn't happen, it'll be your fault.
Yeah, right.
When the Board of Education wouldn't approve it. I mean-
Exactly, right. Jack.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I want to start off by thanking Eli for giving half of my report. So a couple things to talk about. The first one, in January, the end of January, we had our Fearless Forensic Festival, our speech and debate competition. It's the first time we hosted one, and I attended, and I learned a lot about speech and debate. But it was an amazing environment to see those kids and kind of the seriousness of it and professionalism. But it was also fun to see our kids as leaders. When all those other people came into our building, our kids came in early and made sure rooms were set up. But I really want to point out Brian Hausch for all the work that he's done to start building that program. So we're excited about the direction of that. We had our Day of Empowerment. It was supposed to be January 30th, and we had a makeup day a week later. We only, interestingly, had one presenter that was not able to come back. And Stephanie actually was able to fill in for that person. It was our yoga instructor. So you'll see her yoga mat in the green yoga mat there in the picture.
I've heard things about that.
Yeah, but no, so we had it was a great day. We had about 25 different speakers, and last year was planned primarily by Kate Lohmeyer, and this year it was planned primarily by Shannon Morano. So it was kind of taking the ideas that Kate had, but then also bringing in new presenters based on kind of the needs that our counselor recognized. So I thought that was really important. So a good day. We've already started talking about next year and what the future holds for that. And then if you flip or scroll, the next thing you'll see is a project that I want to highlight. This is a really exciting project. This is our new art teacher. She came to me early this year, and she had a shoe project idea, and it wasn't really anything to do with basketball shoes. And I had just read that the NBA changed the rules to loosen up the colors and the designs that the players could have on their shoes. So her and I talked about it, and it developed into this project. And Nike, we reached out to our Nike rep, and he immediately said no. And then the next morning I got up and I had an email from him that said,
Scroll.
but he immediately, yes, emailed next morning. And when I got the next morning, I had an email from him saying that he had thought about it all night and that Nike would match us 1-for-1. So every pair we bought, Nike would donate a pair. So we knew we could get shoes that were cheaper, but we really wanted to go with Nike to support the mission that they had with the Colin Kaepernick ad that was controversial for them, but we felt like it was aligned with our values. So it was really neat to see kind of art and athletics married together, to see our kids have the voice to kind of stand up for their causes or talk about the causes they valued. So it's really neat just to see all those coming together, and then to see our athletes actually wearing kind of those shoes that when you're playing out there and all the fans are talking about the shoes, they're talking about important causes. And I think that's the really important thing. So, and then the last thing I just wanted to highlight again was the band orchestra trip. So last week we left Thursday afternoon, traveled to Chicago by bus. We got there. We intentionally left a little bit early so that we would have time for the kids to be kids when we got to the hotel. So we didn't want to get there at 10 o'clock and then just go to bed. So we got there, and some of the kids went swimming, and it was just funny how as soon as kids jump in a pool, it's like the maturity level just drops. But you realize that kids are kids, and
It's such a good energy release.
No, it was really. I think if you ask the kids the highlight of the trip, I think those first couple hours there was really beneficial, and we saw a lot of
hotel pool.
Yeah. But we saw a lot of kids that never hang out together or never associate with each other at school that were playing together and joking together and talking and laughing. We got up the next morning, and that Friday was really like our work day. So we went to 2 different elementary schools, or K-8 schools, and we performed concerts. So our kids were performing at each one, and the first picture, the white and orange picture that you see there, that's at King's, and that was one of the districts that Brian Mayer actually taught in when he taught in Illinois. And then the next picture over is Eswood, and that was actually the first school he ever taught in, so we got to have his picture in kind of his first classroom. And in both of those schools, because they're K-8 buildings, he still had students that he had as kindergartners that were going to school there. So it was really neat. And then just to see our kids kind of step up and get to perform and be kind of celebrities for especially the younger kids was really exciting. And to hear how well our kids sounded and how proud they were to answer questions was fun. And then I do not have a picture up here, but after the second school, we traveled to a high school where one of Brian's college friends is actually the band director there, and our kids got to play with their band. So instead of, say, 25, 30 students playing in the band, there was a room with probably 65 kids. And just to get to hear how well they sounded and what they were able to accomplish kind of with that push was really impressive. And I think for our kids, they became the students, and I think they were so proud of themselves to hear how well they sounded. So that was fun.
Great.
And then the Saturday was more of the sightseeing. Well, Friday night we went to Blue Man Group, and that was exciting. Joaquin, that you see there, got his throat scoped where they put the camera, and then they continue, like they make it look like it's going all the way down into his stomach. So that was kind of fun. We had really good seats, and then we went to Willis Tower and went to the Bean and did some of that
That's
sightseeing
creepy, that
stuff.
picture, it looks like they're just floating.
So that's at Willis Tower where they have an
Yeah.
observation
Yeah.
deck.
They're doing there.
Yeah, so that was very cool.
I didn't see anybody sitting down like that when I was there.
Yeah.
Stepping in.
Just like, it gives me vertigo just looking at it.
Yep.
So the kids get really wet at Blue Rainbow?
No. We were in the 4th and 5th rows. We were the last rows with the ponchos, but I don't think anybody really got too wet. So it
So
was a fun trip.
I was just wondering about student participation at Empowerment Day, because I know that's been a little.
It was comparable to what it's been in the past. It's
Okay.
still lower than we want. I actually met with Ms. Morano today, and we're working on getting surveys out, and we're actually really focusing on surveying the kids who were not there. So those are the kids that we really want to hear from, of why did you not come, what would it take to encourage you to be there. So we want our kids there, we think it's important. So we're going to ask why they weren't.
Great,
Good, good.
thanks.
Don?
We got our special education profile, and I was gonna tell you about that. Every year around this time, in December, we get one major report, which is a special ed profile, and it's sort of the preliminary number crunching before the special ed grading, which comes out in September. So I go over those twice a year for the board. And I gave you some background information on this time around. Basically, we get these reports from information we report through the EMIS system, which is the Educational Management Information System that all schools report to the Ohio Department of Education, and some audits they do of our information. So since there's a turnaround time, all the figures are from like the first couple reporting periods of the 2017-18. So our profile and then our official rating that the state gives us is based on last year's school year information, so I wanted to make that clear. In general, you can see the first graph just shows that we have about between 13 and 14% special education kids for our population, and that's about in line with Ohio. Ohio's average is about 15%, so just under that. And then below that is sort of a breakdown of all the categories that you can qualify in special ed, and about 86 to 87% of our kids fall in categories of specific learning disability, other health impairment minor, which a big chunk of that is usually ADHD or ADD, and speech language impairment, so speech therapy services, and autism. So those four categories are about 87% of the kids that receive special education services here in Yellow Springs. And then just looking at that population, the figures on the special education profile are based on compliance indicators and then some other performance indicators. And so I just broke those down for you. And there are some where there were some changes to be announced as an orange. No report means that we didn't have enough data because we're so small. So we had so few they couldn't really put it in their formula. And then of course met and not met, and they have a target and they want us to meet it. So for preschool, the first couple, they're looking at least restrictive environment, meaning our kids getting special ed services in a regular setting, or they're being segregated and separated out into a separate program. And we met those targets where most of our kids are included. Our preschool is an inclusive preschool. It isn't set up in a way where it would be considered a special facility. So we have 100% inclusive and none in a separate program at this time. And then transitioning from kindergarten from preschool to kindergarten, their target is 100%, and we were 100% with our timelines for that. And then there's a bunch on the bottom that it just has a note and there's orange. When I first looked at it, when we got it in December, there's social emotional skills and growth, acquisition of knowledge, so academic, pre-academic skills and growth, and then behavior skills and growth. Well, all the skills they had met for our preschool, and then all of the growth indicators had not met. So I pulled it back up to make this report in January, and they had all changed, and I thought, did I look at Cedar Cliffs? Like I was thinking, did I look at the wrong one, or did I, why, I've never had them change. So I called the state, and they said, we don't know. We're recalculating everything. So I waited till now to see if they'd recalculate, but apparently they have not. So I don't know if those are met or not. I don't know what that issue is, and neither did they. So then, that's all there is for preschool. For school age, there's two areas. There's achievement, and again, remember this is just our special ed population. There's participation rate, if you look down what's met for reading and math testing, and they want us to have 98% participation. We had 100%, which is good. I was actually surprised by that. Proficiency rate, so they want kids with disabilities to have a target for reading of 24.68% and math 29%, which isn't that high of a percentage, but we exceeded that, and we had 43 and then 33%. The discipline disproportionality, that's looking at our certain minority races or ethnicities overrepresented in our discipline figures. Are we suspending kids of certain race or ethnicity more than 10 days more often than kids that are maybe Caucasian? And same with expulsions. They want it to be under 3.5% for either of those, and ours was 2%. So we're under that. Again, there's the least restrictive environment, the push. They break it down for school age. Are you included more than 80% of the time? Are you included 60% of the time, meaning like pulled out into the resource room? You have your reading and math in the resource room, and your social studies and science is inclusion. Or are you in a separate facility, like you're a separated room all day long, or an actual separate facility? And they have the targets listed there. Included 80% or more, they want 64, we're at 81, 82%. The more than 60%, you're out a part of the day, they want it to be around 10% or less, and we're at 4%. And then the separate facility, they want it at 4% or less, and we're at like between 2 and 3%. So we're fine in that area, and we have a big push to include kids. So we don't have a lot of separate, we don't have a whole separate program to put kids in if they happen to be a little bit lower functioning, like some schools do. We include kids. The not met is the alternate assessment. So we have 6 kids that take an alternate assessment, meaning that they have their IQ is such and their functional skills are such because of their disability that they can't participate in the regular tests. So they qualify to take an alternate assessment. And there's a 1% cap on that. You're only supposed to have 1% of the tested population taking that, regardless. And the whole state of Ohio has a problem with this. And so we have to turn in a report, and now we have to do extra papers because ODE has been tasked by the U.S. Department of Education with fixing that. And so they're fixing that by having us fill out papers. And so that's where we're at with that. But it's a whole state.
That seems right.
That's how that works. But it's a whole state issue, and it has been. We have to turn in a justification like why we're over. We have 6 kids that are taking this. I mean, I don't think it's excessive. And
we have a small denominator. It's also
that makes a big difference.
The stats person may go straight to that. Instead of, one kid is going to shift ours much more than a lot of other places.
Well, kind of, some things on this sort of go like this. It shows as a big red not met on your profile or on your rating, but then you're otherwise told to do what's best for the student and make a team decision based on their needs. And so that's what we did. So yeah. But then the other one in blue where we didn't have enough to report on was discipline discrepancy. Are certain categories overrepresented in that, being suspended more than 10 days? Just looking across that, are more kids that have cognitive disabilities being kicked out of school for discipline issues or something like that? And we didn't have enough of that happening even for them to give us numbers. And then the bottom part, the school age, this is just outcomes as opposed to achievement issues. And graduation, meaning students with disability graduating, they want it 85% or more, we're at 100%. Dropping out, they want that, of course, to be less than 21% dropping out. We have none, so that's good. Which in a district like our district, and I've told you that, I've had this before, if it's a really small district, in one small district, I only had 3 kids that were graduating that year that were on IEPs, and one of them happened to move away and not, was still considered ours because they didn't enroll somewhere, and so they were considered dropped out. And so that really brought our percentage down. But we're doing fine with that. And then transition plan in place is just something we're required to have, and we do because it's 100%. We met everything for outcomes. The standard graduation requirements, and I have no accommodations, and that's an error, that's just a typo that I didn't take out. This means I meant to put in no exemptions. Sometimes when you're on a disability, you can be exempted from the consequences of not passing the test or getting the points you're required to get to graduate. So starting, I want to say next year, they're going to start putting it on our profile, the percentage of kids with disabilities who actually pass the test and graduate, meaning they didn't take the alternate assessment and they weren't exempted from the consequences of not passing. And I'm going to say the majority of places I've been in this area, a lot of kids are exempted because they, if you have a disability in reading, you're probably not passing the language, the English language arts test, or if you have a disability in math, you're probably not passing that, those tests. So they did give us, ours was about 78%, or the number of kids that pass without being exempted or taking the alternate assessment. So that's ours, but I don't know what the target's going to be. And then post-school outcomes, this is something that every couple of years we get in a rotation and we have to do a survey after the kids leave. The counselors are getting sent this packet and they have to call the kids the next year and turn in this information. So it's going to be our year next year. So Shannon's going to go, yay, or Dave, one of the two is going to be really excited about that when they get this packet. But that's what that one is. We didn't have any with not enough information. And then the very last section here is the district data. And the first two actually, yeah, they're the same. I don't know why that is.
The difference between if you have more than one, you have an alternative school or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the first three just look like they're a typo. The first three just don't look right on here. I apologize for that. I'm kind of surprised to see it because I don't think it was in my draft. Probably sent the wrong thing to Stephanie. But that's just more reporting stuff, like initial evaluations have to be done on a timeline, and did we have any in compliance things that needed to be, that were late or not corrected, or did we turn things in on time? And we did. And then everything else was met. And then the parent involvement is something they haven't come up with yet. And then are we overrepresenting kids in certain categories or across the board, and we don't even have enough difference for them to make a report. So those were all just more the reporting things. And that is it.
Questions for Helen? Thanks very much for that.
Sure.
That was great, and great and frustrating that, much is to be determined on that report. So I would like to exercise, a privilege I may or may not have as board president, to just juggle the agenda a little bit, Dawn. I'd like to invite Mel Marsh and Acorn Consulting, who are later in the agenda, to come up now so that she doesn't have to spend her entire Valentine's Day evening here at the board.
Well, my husband is already off at Frankenstein, so going home isn't going to help much. But.
So just as a quick reminder, the board has approved engaging Acorn and Mel Marsh to help us work through a facilities plan with a committee of people from town, from the district, which we are hoping to get underway very promptly, probably next month.
Correct.
And so we've invited you to come to just talk a little bit to us about all of that?
Well, actually, I wanted to listen.
Ah.
I want to find out, since you are chartering this,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately any report from this committee will come back to you for yea or nay.
Mm-hmm.
I need to hear from you what it is you're expecting.
Mm-hmm.
So my first question, and I'm open to all of you. My first question is, what is the ideal outcome of this work? What can we do as this committee that will make you say this was successful?
I really wish I'd seen these questions.
I sent them in
This is
advance,
good.
I'm sorry.
No,
I
no,
sent
no,
them
I
in
mean
advance.
like in a funny way, like I'm like, oh my gosh, I wasn't expecting this. So, I'll throw something out, I guess, just, some sense of successful community engagement. I don't even know what that means, but.
Well, I think after having gone through the facilities levy, and I was actually on the committee for the levy to work the process last time through the actual vote. I think one of the big things we need to know is kind of close the gap for what we thought we were on the right path last time, and it turned out, from the vote that we were substantially not on a path that was acceptable to the community. So how do we close that so that we make certain that we actually have a good understanding of the community's needs, what's acceptable, and at the same time ensuring that we're doing the right thing for the kids at the end of the day, but for the district, for the teachers, so that we do get the best outcome across the board for the community. I think that was hard one lesson from last time. And I still don't know how you do it accurately, because all signs from what we had last time, that plan was very good, very sound, and a lot of positive feedback to it. And then, of course, it was a very different answer on election day. So, and that's often how these things go. So it's going to be a process of maturing what that plan is and changing. And so this is a great process to go through. But any way that we can close that gap with the community so that we understand better, and they do too. I think that's the other piece of this is better communicating the needs of the school in a way that everyone understands it also. So it's lots of stakeholders trying to get everybody on the same page and finding a good balance.
Oh, yeah, no, I was actually just,
Oh, okay, I thought you were.
no, that's fine. Actually, so I guess what I'd like to see, or what I think would be, is really starting with a very necessity, like stressing necessity, and then working up from there of like what necessity on both ends. So what's needed for buildings and what's needed for education, and then sort of from there being like, this would be splurging, however it be needed here, and then work up. If you're willing to spend more, though, we could do this, we could do that, but I'd like to see like what's needed, and then from there, but once again, what's needed building-wise, land-wise, education-wise, and build up from there. But here's what could make that better. Here's what would turn this into no longer a necessity if we tear this down, like from every facet, I guess, to say like what a renovation would look like versus what a total rebuild would look like. But built around necessity and cost. Yeah, I think that would be, for me, just like, what, even, what would you guys consider splurge? Or something, I'm trying to think of the word. Yeah, overspending or whatever, something along those lines, but yeah, really defining.
And that fine line there, there's this enough to too much, and somewhere there's a fine line, and we hope to find that fine line.
Right, but define all of it, so it's like, look, this is necessary, we can't go lower than this.
Right, the minimum requirements.
This is what the top's doing, this is what that would cost, and then, right, from there, it looks like you need this. And these are actually absolutely needed, this is what the newer schools, you need these things. This would be splurging, but this is the benefits of that. If you don't have that, this is what could happen, or here's where you'll be in 10 years. I'd like to see a more detailed of, if something is spent that may seem odd, why would someone spend that? That sort of thing.
Anyone else? I have more questions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's been said in a variety of ways, but again, I would like to prevent an ideal outcome. I'm not 100% sure about that, but certainly I would like to prevent the sort of element of surprise that I feel like kept sort of emerging at the very end. So, you know, whatever process needs to happen or unfold that feels maybe hard and difficult, but also honest. Because I think there was a lot of hard work and thought and energy that got put into this, and that somehow, you know, we weren't picking up what was really out there. So whatever help we can get in making sure that happens seems really important to me.
My next question is, what absolutely must change? Is there anything in your opinion that this is like non-negotiable, it has to be different?
Was it the trailers?
Well,
So-
If you talk about
Okay,
hard-
and you mean about the
facilities.
process or about the, I'm not sure what the.
About the buildings.
Okay, all right.
So for
okay.
example, if we're saying we really, it's non-negotiable, we're gonna get rid of those trailers, let's know that in advance.
So I'm actually a little reluctant to answer this question because I think what we've promised in this process is that we wipe the slate clean and all options are on the table. Personally, I got all kinds of things which would seem obviously that need to change, starting with the McKinney Middle School shoebox, you know, double wide, whatever it is. Right, but that list is going to get long pretty quickly, and I'm not sure that I would necessarily want to throw all of that out by way of prejudicing wherever the discussion may
Well, I thought one
go.
of the professed purposes of this was to not say from us, from the beginning,
Yeah.
anything about what absolutely needs to happen or not happen, no
Because it
matter.
seemed like we were sort of accused of being attached to
Yeah, I thought that was the
stuff
key, was for us to not do that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Then I have a corollary, and again, if you may or may not want to answer this one either, but what can't change, if anything? And I'll throw out an example. Do we want to keep Mills Lawn School here, or do we want to say we want to have one school campus and it's all elsewhere?
Obviously, all that's all on the table to discuss.
I think, right, I think anything should be on the table for discussion. And I think that what I hope comes out of this is precisely that we consider the widest range of possibilities, but that we winnow down pretty quickly to the things that are both financially, logistically, educationally sensible. But I don't think we should start with anything that says that this is not negotiable. That's my own sense of it. And I think that's also
tradition.
what we, yeah.
Can I interject something real quick?
Sure.
First of all, I want to apologize to the board about this. This was sent to me on Friday. I was out Monday and Tuesday, so I didn't see it for today. So when she mentioned it, I checked my email immediately and saw it and just pulled it up. So sure enough, it was attached to an email she sent, I think Friday or Saturday, you know, there it is. So apologize for that. So I want to say that because the board hasn't had time to really think about these questions before right now.
That's correct.
And I
It's like this
apologize for
is
that.
exams,
Seriously,
graduate
We've been talking about facilities for a long time.
and that is entirely my fault, and so I just want to make sure the community is aware of that, so.
What's outside the scope of the committee? Thinking about the responsibility of the committee, what's in, what's out from your perspective?
I think the way I would answer that is that insofar as the facilities are connected to curriculum and to larger educational goals and staffing and things like that, I think that's probably outside the purview. I don't think this committee should be charged with rethinking how we teach science as it figures out what the facilities look like. That's my initial reaction to that. Or we should hire another person to teach this, that, or the other. That seems out of bounds to me.
Great. Because we know that people have opinions on everything.
Sure, exactly, that's
I
right.
do know that.
And yes, you guys do better than I.
Yes.
So if, it's very helpful if I can say, that's not our job.
Yeah.
And-
Well, but I'm gonna add a corollary to that.
Sure.
I mean, one of the things that, almost getting to the next question, your vision for the future facilities is, these are gonna be facilities that we hope to be in place for quite a long time, even past, if there's a
Yes.
levy and bond, if that's what we funded, even past the life of that. I mean, we were talking last time, it was gonna be an 85-year lifespan of the building, so we have to account for how education, not only the needs today, but there has to be some, I guess, scoping and envisioning, and that's where we have to rely on the experts, hopefully in the education field, as opposed to just the folks who have strong opinions who may not be vested in education per se themselves. But we have to envision where it's going to go. For instance, 30 years ago, you wouldn't have worried about Wi-Fi and all these laptops you have to plug into this building.
So
Whereas
try
now
to
you have
imagine
to.
that, yeah.
So what is the thing we have to worry about for the 50 years from now? And so there might come a point where you do have to talk a little bit about education
Fair
to a
enough.
certain extent, but to Steve's point, it's definitely valid as well, because that could become a quick rabbit hole in this town
Oh, yeah.
of how it should be taught, as opposed to let's envision where education might go and what the needs of the learners 50 years from now.
Let me just catch up too fast.
Mhm.
Great, anybody else? Okay, then thinking about the vision.
Well, can I,
Yes,
maybe,
please.
yes. So, yes, are the new facilities sustainable, for the future? Are they environmentally?
Yes.
I mean, that was a huge issue. I think that one of the prominent sort of groups had was, how do we deal with the whole environmental issue and sustainability piece? So that feels important. How do we predict what happens in education, because things change so dramamately, and then
So we're on that question then? That's
Sorry?
what, I thought we were still, I know you moved
Oh,
to
sorry.
the future facilities, but I didn't know if you were.
I thought she was still talking about what's outside the scope of the task force, because we're thinking about sustainability. Yeah.
Mhm.
Is that what you're, okay, it sounded like you were talking about the future.
Well, I kind of sort of goes hand
Yeah,
in hand
right.
too.
Go ahead.
So, okay, what is your vision? And this one, I'm really interested in your personal opinions, because you are members of the Yellow Springs community and you do have opinions.
So again, mindful of how we want this process to run, I guess what I would say is, I think what I want are buildings that function. And I think that means a whole lot of things. Aida started to talk about some of them, that not only does the heating and the cooling system actually work, which it really doesn't at the moment in certain spots, but it works environmentally and is, and we think about all of that, what the physical plant really looks like going into the future, but at the same time, I want these buildings to represent how we value education in this town. That the buildings themselves are emblematic of the place, the value we place on kids, on the school system itself, on education, and on the teachers who have to work in these buildings day in and day out. I guess I would want to impress on people that buildings talk to us, and they send us messages. And kids pick up on this all the time. And so when they travel, especially if you talk to some of our student athletes, they go to different schools where the facilities do in fact speak to them, this is an important place. You matter in this place. I don't think our buildings do that right now. So I hope that we can get to a point where kids are proud to walk into the building because it's a place that says to them, you are important.
So, taking that one step further, Mari, you shared with me an article and the stats about how teachers select where they want to be, right? And it was really interesting to me, and I think salary was third. And I think it was the administration was first, facilities were second, and salary was third. So I don't think it's controversial to say at all that future vision for our facilities is one where we also recruit and maintain and keep really great teachers, right?
Yeah,
We have facilities that they love to be in just as much as the students love to be in.
Yep.
So, and facilities that are accessible. We have, I think we've had some challenges just because of the age of the buildings
Yeah.
and how things have changed in society, but we've got some kids who actually may have mobility issues or
Oh,
or
yeah.
other things,
Oh, yeah.
and it's so inclusive. The inclusivity portion is a big part.
Yeah, I would agree on that one, and also the part about teachers feeling, like the buildings, whatever it is, is a functional place where they can do their best teaching, their best work with their students, and not regularly spend part of a day trying to find more buckets for them in the ceiling or the whatever it is that day.
It's hard enough to teach without having
It is
to be-
already hard enough
to be a building manager as well. Yeah, got it. That makes sense.
So this is my, did you?
Both of you, yeah, for this side, we'll
Oh,
go to your
great,
side.
great. Yeah, so my fantasy, which I don't feel attached to because I feel really committed to this process and I feel committed to our community. But my fantasy would be, and this stems from when we were starting to investigate project-based learning as a sort of switch for our district. And it came from the students who were doing stuff that was closer to project-based learning, and their buildings were more accommodating to that. The kids really talked about, and this is not just feeling invited by the building, but creating the space that they need to do the work, the creative work that goes into project-based learning. And so what does that look like? I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to rely on our architects and our community to help with that. But just whatever really supports their sort of growth and their development and, sort of their desire in terms of learning. And I think that could look like a million different things. But I would really want any future facility to support our students and, the function and development of their learning and education. So that's why I think it's really important that we hear from them.
I'm sorry, I don't know names, but.
Just say Steve, it works.
I heard the roll call had two Steve in it, yeah.
Functionality, to me, I think is extremely key. In a school that just functions well, where nowhere is not being utilized properly. And functionality on the level too of, could it be, like Antioch where the cafeteria has, stuff grown locally, like things like that where, can it function communally? Yeah, I think the future facilities could function more on the line of community interaction with the facilities, so that people can get more involved because there will be things for people to do and using our environment. That's when I see it. That's what I think of a cafeteria. That would be. I do think of solar panels. I do think of things along those lines where. Well, just things that would pay in the future if we started it now and invested in it now. What that could mean and what people how that could function. Responsibilities things along that lines for students, that kind of thing. That's what I envision.
Well, as you said that, I mean, you remember that story about what's the best time to plant a tree? The best time is 20 years ago, the second best time is today. You need to think of you're trying to plant a tree with these facilities.
Right.
Yeah.
And, yeah, once again, with the concept of longevity,
We should just.
that these are,
Yeah, that's right.
So,
these will still be impressive.
oh, okay.
Lift
There
it
you go.
over, they'll
Glad to
still
help.
be impressive.
So the next one is, in your opinion again, what caused this past levy to fail? I read a lot of newspaper articles, trying to bring myself up to speed on this, but
Well, if you read a lot of newspaper articles, you may have inadvertently hit on one of the reasons the levy failed.
the newspaper.
I think there was a tremendous amount of disinformation. Some of it was the usual kinds of confusions. It's a complicated issue. It had a lot of moving parts. Figuring out the different parts of a bond issue confuses me, and I spent a lot of time studying it. Some of the disinformation was clearly deliberate, and so maybe that goes back to one of your early questions. I think the committee, the group that you'll be leading, does need to think about how it does a better job, a more effective job, not only of getting information out to the community, but countering what I expect will be an inevitable set of fabrications and deceits that are going to pop up.
Well, I do think like TJ just said, Facebook and, social media is a new sort of phenomenon that we're all kind of newly interacting with and surprised by and not sure about and having to deal with, address, whatever. So, in part that I think happened. There were a lot of whether it was sustainability or we've got buildings and, you're making do with, what you've got and why do we need more? And there were just different sort of factions that I think needed to be addressed in a different kind of way. Maybe, in terms of building locations, some people felt like one building was most appropriate. Some people felt like, we couldn't have this big building here in the heart of town. So, it was just a lot of varying of opinions, and it was hard to sort of bring people closer together in that respect, and that's what I would hope this process might be able to do in a different kind of way, where, the community has an opportunity to grow from this. I feel like I've grown from this whole process. I feel like I want the community to grow from this process, and I would like us to see, figure out a way that we can, and what does that mean in terms of creating a facility from that. Does that make sense?
It does. And it goes back to an earlier question about what's in as well as outside the scope. What's inside the scope is clearly messaging,
I think it
telling the
has to be.
story.
Yeah, and I think that the members of this committee each have networks and constituencies, and I think they're going to need to help us reach those networks and constituencies so that there is a much broader buy-in for whatever results, whatever it happens to be, so that we can be more confident that we can get this task done.
Scapegoating, that would be the easiest. Saying the problem is based on this when it's not. And there was a lot of scapegoating in which it's just like, why are you blaming this group for those problems? That was, I would say, a major issue where it's like, we weren't really talking about, we were bringing up every issue and allowing it to all be blamed on one thing. It's terrible logic, but it worked on a lot of people. People were just sort of doing that. And so the concept of scapegoating and other groups not sort of taking on the responsibility of like, that's really not their fault. there was a lot of people not minding that there was scapegoating like that being done, and that wasn't helpful at all. So.
But that's happening nationally too, unfortunately.
Correct.
Oh, yes, no, it
That's-
was
it's
a
a
microcosm,
national
there's no
problem,
question
but
about it.
Yeah.
It's a problem
Context.
nonetheless, and it was one of the primary causes that I saw.
Yeah, as you're talking about it, it seems like we've taken some of those national trends and really
Oh, yeah.
honed them very well here in Alice Springs.
I think that's fair.
There was also a convergence of other pressures, particularly financial pressures, that happened right about the same time.
Correct.
You know, the people's bills went up for utilities inside the village.
The fire station.
And fire station levy.
The illusory fire station.
You know, the other things that are important as well, but a lot of bills came due at the same time. Because I think in general, this town has kicked the can down the road on many things. You know, buildings among them, the fire station among them. Utility infrastructure.
Yeah.
All of that, it kind of came up at the same time, and that made, you know, this was just one more thing, and I think we were third in line for
As diminished trough.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at least, you know, I think people were, and rightfully so, stressed about what that looked like in the future and how that was going to play out for them. So that's understandable.
This has been so helpful. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you.
And just, who is the person that's going to be part of the committee or?
TJ.
You are, and,
TJ.
yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Hi TJ, very nice to meet you.
You
Look forward to working with you.
I do.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mel.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to
Do we
this.
want to talk anything at all, anything else you want to share about your thoughts on the process as far as we talked about with the board at all?
Yeah, as far as, one thing that, and especially after listening to you, an essential step is going to be taking the entire committee on a walkthrough through all the buildings. I have a colleague in Clark County who was the physical plant man at Wittenberg for many, many years. And then he also, after he left Wittenberg, he oversaw the renovation at Catholic Central. I've contacted him to ask him if he would be willing to come speak with this group, and also potentially arrange a walkthrough of Catholic Central, so we can see how that school transformed
Great.
with what they've done. So I think there has to be some pretty significant education.
Yep.
Because none of us who are going to be on there are building experts. One person is an educator, so, you know, we're not education experts, we're not building experts. But we still can learn enough to have some effective assessments. You know, say what is possible by looking at Catholic Central, what must be fixed by doing a walkthrough and seeing what the actual learning environment is. After listening to you guys, I think we had talked about definitely having some public input opportunities, but I think we need to have some public input opportunities that include faculty, include students, as well as the general community. Because again, the education of that group, as you were talking, it made me realize that they must understand the teacher's perspective and they must understand the student perspective, as well as the community perspective, because they might be sharing that information back to the community about. But let me tell you what it's really like to have to learn in an environment where the roof is dripping on your head. And the public isn't going to know that until we start having those educations. Beyond that, I think my job is to create a safe space for the people to talk amongst themselves and try to figure things out and try to say, you know, what they're passionately for or passionately against, and encourage them to try to get a lot of public input. So it's very amorphous at this point, other than those first couple of steps of some education, but it will evolve. One thing I have learned in my work is that you don't have to have the answer you're going to come to at the end of the beginning, because otherwise you didn't meet the process. So I've learned to be comfortable with that ambiguity.
Great. Splendid.
Do you have any additional questions for me?
Appreciate you taking the time.
Yes, great to meet you officially like this, and yeah, we're excited.
Me too.
Good.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
And you are now not obligated to stick around for the rest of all of
Thank you
this.
so much.
But you're welcome to. So now we're going to go back to the order of our agenda and get to point 3.1, the financial report.
The YSEE funded the If You Were in My Shoes project with the art teacher that Jack reported on, was $1,320.75. And that concludes my report.
Wow. Mario,
That was
are you
great.
noticing how that happened?
I am.
Yeah, I mean, that was a model
I didn't
of
even ask if you had
efficiency
any questions.
and,
I'm gonna make you really happy. I promise.
In generic terms, since that was a community concern that got brought up this week? Or is that too, we want to discuss that?
I would, I would table that
Okay,
for
that's
another
fine.
discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll bring that back up at some other point. Yeah. So now I want to go on to agenda item 4.1, and our superintendent's report minus item 4.1B.
Okay, well, let me pull up the bullying report if you give me a second to do that. So, you know, we do this twice a year, and because it's, you know, required by law, I think it's important to make it public and to share with folks. And I'm not sure how much time we have to spend on it without the anomalies. I mean, this is not, what we're seeing here is not inconsistent than what we've seen, I think, in previous years. The problem is largely a middle school 5, 6, 7, 8 problem. As you can see, it has been that way, and we're really talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 incidents that were reported to the principals that qualify under the bullying definition. And of course, we know that that's more than one instance and pervasive, and so it doesn't mean that people aren't being treated poorly by other kids or, you know, called names. It just means that it wasn't reported in a pervasive way that was continual on one student. Yes, Sylvia?
Well, just so that's why I always say I wish it wasn't called the bullying report.
Yeah.
Could be like some kind of like behavior that we don't want report, and then there's a variety of those things, the majority of which is not the true, doesn't meet the true definition of bullying. But I know I don't have the power to change the name of the report, but it's so like, you know, the bullying report where you're gonna read about the tons of bullying that happens instead of the tons of rudeness, unkindness, harassment. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just interesting to me. And I'm not belittling bullying as a problem, but I think it leads people to call any unkindness bullying, and that's not really accurate.
We see that a lot, I think, right? I mean, that's it's a challenge for sure.
But let me just get you to reiterate, what you have to report to us tonight does not differ appreciably from reports we've seen in the
It's
past.
very consistent within 1 or 2 incidents a year. And given our student size, assuming that that's accurate, a measure of what the state would call bullying, it is a very small number. I know anecdotally that's not what often is talked about in the community with parents and other folks. I want to recognize that. But this is what's reported to the principal that ultimately gets confirmed as bullying, and you know, it goes from there. So I think that's an important piece. The second thing I want to talk about is the McKinney Middle School, Yellow Springs High School principal search. We have 22 candidates who officially applied. A lot of really high quality candidates have applied. It's a little odd because I'm saying that while I'm standing right next to one of the candidates. It's been a little awkward for us at times, you know. But
no idea, dog.
we try to. Yeah, and so we're going to start that process ASAP. I'm a day or two behind right now, to be honest with you. So tomorrow, actually tonight when I get home, I'm going to sift through and do some paper screening, some more. We're going to try to get down to 12 candidates and start to make some phone calls tomorrow, schedule very early next week, maybe even over the weekend, some phone screening interviews. And we'll kind of go from there. And then next week, the end of next week, we're going to do the Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to do the formal in-person interviews. And so the goal is to get that done quickly, so we really have to move, obviously, in relative haste here. And then that group of 6 will be taken down to 3 candidates who 2 weeks later, after we've done background checks and given them a chance to prepare their presentations and what they're going to do, we'll come back on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And the dates are March, we get the exact dates so the community can know. It's super important to have folks there. That's going to be March the
12th,
It says
13th.
11th, 12th, and 13th. So, did I put that on the?
It's in your report.
Yeah, my report,
Yeah.
thank you. So 11th, 12th, and 13th, where one candidate will come each night. And the idea will be that they'll spend the whole day with us. So from 8 a.m. until possibly 8 p.m. or 7:30 p.m., they will be in our schools. And they'll start with a presentation to the high school, middle school staff, who will then proceed to give an evaluation at the end of that presentation of some kind of professional development. And then they're going to move into and do a mock parent meeting where a parent is angry about an issue, and then they have to be able to find a way to resolve it with that parent.
Can't we find a real angry parent?
Yeah, that's no comment.
I bet.
And then,
Steve.
and they're also going to do. You were just setting me up for something there, Steve. and then they're going to do They're also going to do a mock teacher evaluation observation, and then a mock post-conference with that teacher. And going to get feedback, and so they're going to be observed and evaluated. Matt and I will be in on that process at least the whole time. And then after that, they're going to do lunch with teachers, where teachers get to ask questions freely with them. And then once that's over, there will be a meeting with kids, where kids will sit on a panel and interview the candidates and ask them questions. And then after that happens,
Can I ask how that panel is going to be constituted? Are there going to be seniors who are?
so it wouldn't be seniors, it would be kids who are going to be here next year.
Okay.
So important. So it'd be juniors all the way down to probably 7th graders. Maybe we'd have in the mix, and a good combination of kids, I think, that are really with it and have a good sense about what they're looking for in their principal. And so then at some point we're going to have a reflection where I give this person some feedback on their work with our teachers to really see their reaction to that, if you will. And then they're going to have a chance the rest of the day to kind of walk around the building, get to know people, talk to people. And then the hope is to have dinner at that point around 5 or 5:30, 5 o'clock. We'll invite a couple board members who want to come if you'd like. If you're interested in any one of those days, or all 3 days, we probably can't have more than 2 board members. We can have, unfortunately, but maybe we can have 2 on one night, 2 on another night, and 1 on a third night. And I'll go with all 3 of those candidates to do that. And then afterwards, we will come right back to the high school, the library, where they will do a formal presentation to the community about their own background, who they are.
So the dinner is before that?
Right.
That was like a not fun dinner for the.
Yeah. I mean, we could switch it around too.
Yeah,
we
So
can do
I
that.
won't order anything because I might feel nauseous.
It's pretty intense. But, and then there's a presentation to the community for 30 minutes, and then after that 30-minute presentation, there'll be some open Q&A from the community. And then we'll thank the candidate for taking all their time to be with us for that day. And there will be a good 15, 20-minute debrief with the community without the candidate there to get their feedback. And they, again, will have a chance to fill out an evaluation of the candidates. The next day, which will happen to be a board meeting night, we will, after school, I've agreed to meet with teachers and some administrators teachers who were on the original committee, as well as a couple more, and our administrative team to talk about what we saw in the candidates and see if we can narrow it down to a finalist. And then we'll have some discussions in executive session as a board that night. And then we will kind of hopefully be ready to make some decisions from there. So that's our plan. We want the whole community to get involved.
Yeah.
And for those who are, I understand it's a really intense day, but that is the day of a principal, right? There are frequently days where they're here at 7 in the morning and they don't leave till 9 o'clock at night. And they work all day long, go from meeting to meeting to meeting. They'll have 7 meetings in a day. And of those 7 meetings, they'll have 1 meeting where they're celebrating the birth of a new child from one of their teachers and having a really positive conversation about that. They'll go to the very next meeting where they're having a disciplinary meeting where they're telling a teacher that you're not coming back next year. And then they'll have another meeting that's very different than that with an angry parent about their own personal issue. And then they have to go and do a positive presentation to a group of community members. That is the life of an administrator in schools. We have to go from one emotion to an extreme emotion the other way from minute to minute, and we have to be able to adapt on a regular basis with that. And if these people can't handle this, they're not gonna be able to have Yellow Springs High School. And so I know it's tough, but we're looking for somebody who's tough and can handle it and do the job. And so, you know, that's kind of what it's about. Is that a fair assessment, I mean, of what we do?
Much.
So that's it. Right.
How's your blood pressure?
We have to be really good at compartmentalizing. And that's I don't know if that's healthy or not, but it's what happens.
Public health says no. We're all doing it.
Yeah, you have to do it. I mean, it's bizarre, but it's what happens.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, so that's all, that's my report.
Thank you. Any questions about any of that? That was, whirlwind. I'm exhausted already. Okay, so then I'd like us to move on to the administrative portion of the consent calendar, items 4.2 through 4.4. Do I have a motion for those, please?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any items that we need to discuss?
I would feel good if we could just kind of share a quick discussion about the calendar.
Sure.
Realizing that this came to you later, I just want to go over a couple things with you that are just different from previous years, just so you're aware. So one of the things we noticed when we were doing this discussion about Carnegie units, and we looked at our calendar and we said, okay, we're going to make sure that in the future we can do things to ensure that we're doing great there. Really changing the academic lab issue will solve the problem completely for us, and so that's not an issue. But we also noticed that districts like other districts around us are sending students to school for 178 days a school year. Yellow Springs sends kids to school for 174. And so this calendar adds 3 days to the calendar for kids. This is the actual days students are in attendance. And teachers are in attendance 184 days.
And was that with the difference in the hours?
Hours?
Because I feel like I get always confused about
Yeah,
it,
it's
so paying
complicated.
attention to days or hours.
Yeah, it's actually, it doesn't, yeah, it's hours ultimately, but
Okay.
I think they just, so here's what I think happened. I think Stephanie and I figured this out just recently. We think that what happened is that when we switched from day to hours, Yellow Springs was one of a district that did waiver days, if you remember. So we had to actually apply for waivers for professional development days from the state of Ohio. And so Susan we'd always put together a waiver day presentation, she'd put it in, she'd send it to the state would waive those student attendance days as professional development days for us. So they would count as student attendance days, as far as student count and getting kids to school on time. And so we essentially had 174 days, but we had 4 student non-attendance days that were counted as student days. It's kind of odd, So really it was 178, that's how it counted, but we only went to school 174. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And so when that went away, we stopped doing those waiver days, but we kept counting the calendar the same way, if that makes sense. And so now it looks like, so what we're trying to do here in this calendar is adding 3 student attendance days. So we're jumping from 174 to 177 here. And what gets taken out, which is still a little bit of a question, is a few professional days. So if you remember, we've had in the past 4 days up front in August. We've taken that down to 2 in this calendar. Instead of having a Friday student start day, we have a Thursday student start day. Most of everything else is largely the same. There's a professional day in November that we have, usually the first or second Friday in November. That's no longer in the calendar. And everything else is largely the same. 2 weeks at the holiday winter break. And then there's still a week and a day for the March spring break in the calendar. And the March Professional Development Day is still in the calendar. The same number of 2 our late start days. With this calendar, by moving that start time up from Friday the 23rd to Thursday the 22nd, it moves the student final attendance day to the last Friday in May, which moves the last staff attendance day to the first Monday, I think in June is how it is. So that's kind of how that works. And with what we have in our contract, which is a flex day on that last day, which means if teachers come for a full day before the official first start day of school for them and work a full day and sign in and sign out, then they get credit and they don't have to come theoretically to that last day at the end, if that makes sense. So then theoretically, if they needed to go on vacation for a week and they wanted to plan right after the kids got out in May, they could go right after the kids left on the 28th or 29th, and then they could be gone that way. So that's kind of an added positive thing about this calendar. Sylvia?
I'm wondering about the TBD senior graduation at the end.
So that's why it's sort of a draft calendar at this point still. We want to include that date obviously in the calendar. We want to include the exhibition night dates and all these other, we don't have those officially yet, but we'll work on them. I think the date would work out to looks like the 28th would be graduation.
So it would still be the last Thursday?
Yeah.
Like it has been for.
Yeah, we just haven't gotten to it, but it would
Okay.
be May 28th, right? I mean,
For
it's-
graduation, yes.
Yeah.
And then the last day for seniors, I think, would probably be the 26th we were looking at?
26, that's another thing where
Potentially?
we're looking at, the last day of seniors. We just, so in an effort to really make sure we're really looking into a lot of these laws, we've noticed the last day for seniors by state law says 3 days. So, which means senior day, they're allowed to excuse, seniors can be excused for 3 days. So it's looking like the 26th will be the last day for seniors.
Can I just ask a kind of administrative question here? If there is a little bit that's still TBD on this calendar, if we approve it tonight, do we have to reapprove the amended
I
calendar?
think the way it's, and this is probably a question for Don. I think if we look at this, it says it's recommended but be approved as presented and subject to change. So I don't know, what does that mean? I think it means that we can make some of these adjustments.
Details.
I guess it depends on how significant.
Yeah, that's what I'm
it is. If
wondering.
there's little things here and there,
Right.
you probably don't, but if you look on other school calendars, and I'm always looking at other school calendars for various reasons, it will say board approved date such and such, board approved date such and such, all at the bottom,
Right.
and notes when it was reapproved for some changes. But I would say that would only have to be for anything like significant
Okay,
change.
any
Yeah.
student, so student attendance days would be the big thing, or staff days, choose. We're not gonna change any of those days.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
the only reason it's TBD is because it's still a draft technically, is because we don't have the official night of parent-teacher conferences, and we just wanna get those things in the calendar, like
Okay.
exhibition night,
Okay.
just so parents can have it
Okay.
when they get their
That
whole
makes sense.
calendar.
That's
But really, for your purposes, you should be really interested in start and end dates, student attendance days and all that. All that is pretty solid in here.
Good.
We added them all up and we did the math 3 or 4 times and made sure we're good.
All
So,
right.
yeah.
Any other questions about 4.2 through 4.4? We call the roll then, please.
Steve M,
Yes.
TJ,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes,
Aida,
Yes.
Sylvia.
Yes.
motion passes. I'd like to now move to the personnel part of the consent calendar, and this is 4.5 through, I guess, just 4.6. Do I have a motion for that, please?
So moved?
I'll second.
Do you want to pull out the administrative personnel? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Is there anything?
Big sweat, is that what you mean?
Yeah, right, exactly.
No discussion.
Yeah, and these are
Those ties. we gotta change.
the things that we do every year, at this time of the year. Anything in particular that needs to be discussed?
No, the only thing I'll say that's sort of a highlight of this is Matt and Nate Baker are administrators who are on 3-year contracts now. And this is a kind of a renewal of their contracts as they exist presently. We don't typically do salary increases when we do these approvals. We usually do that in uniform in July typically.
In the summertime,
In the
right?
summertime. And so that's the one thing I'll add there. So.
Okay.
The other thing I'll say is to just note, I did share this with Steve, and I think Aida and I may have had some conversation around this, is this idea about sort of retroactive hirings we've had to do. So if you look up at the screen, Chastity Miller, she went on the 5th, 6th grade camp trip. We had in our paperwork and data, Linda Coulter going. Chastity went, Linda did not go, correct me if I'm wrong, ma'am.
She didn't stay overnight.
Yeah.
Oh, she did stay overnight, I'm sorry, yeah. So the pay is for overnight. And so that's kind of how that works, and so we sort of became aware of it just now. And so really part of our process, Stephanie, being new in her role, she's now really getting a good firm grasp on everything that's involved, and so she's picked up on this issue and she's made a personal crusade to solve this problem for us so that we have less and less of the board retroactive stuff. So she and actually Jack are talking about this idea that we're creating a Google Doc that will be essentially a form that we can use instead of the old process we were using, so electronically it should help us. Plus, these guys, we gotta make sure that across the board as administrators, we're dotting our i's and crossing our t's, and people aren't working without going through the formal approval process that goes all the way through. The biggest area is obviously the theater arts, work that we still need to work on. So that's all, I just want to share that.
Other discussion about this? Call the roll, please.
TJ,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Aida,
Yes.
Sylvia,
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Okay. We'll move on to item 5, board communications. 5.1, do we have anything from the Career Center?
That a lot of commendations went your way.
That's it. Thank God he's gone.
And you're a huge fan of yours, to say the least. We didn't even have time to read all of the things they wanted to thank you for. I'm not kidding. Just to make the meeting go faster, there's a huge, yeah. So they were really appreciative of your service.
Hey, what's up, Steve?
No, just everything is smooth. Negotiations went great, and really the focus is on the new school, and everything that's happening there is also happening with like gusto and passion. It's nice to be a part. The people there are really friendly. Enjoyed it a lot. Security, I guess, would be the only issue, I guess, because of what happened in senior. That's become something that they're also discussing a lot, but that would be the only there too. Once they're in senior, they wouldn't have to worry about that. But we're just where they are. I guess senior had an issue with the student, and so the Career Center has to sort of look out for that. So that was, I would say that'd be the only thing that came up that wasn't talking about what the new building needs. And
Did you see some of the renderings?
Yeah.
It's cool.
No, it looks like it's
Cool.
going to be a fascinating
Yep.
site, to say the least. It looks pretty amazing. And their board is really, really interesting, to say the least. But that's, yeah.
Are you saying you like them more than us?
That's what I just got out of that.
That's great. No comment. You should know.
Hurts just a little bit.
Well, remember,
It's Valentine's Day. You did me like that. I just can't believe it.
they bribed them in
Their
those
meeting
board
was
meetings with
yesterday.
the food.
Oh, I
The
see.
meals I did.
That's right.
Or
Meals,
was it,
yeah, that's right.
The meal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can't win
they
Steve
wanna
and
get
Bobby
to
with
that.
food.
Those were pretty amazing.
Do we have any other board member items?
Yeah.
Any other board member announcements or thoughts or musings?
Well, I guess I just want to acknowledge some of our athletes. I mean, I know there's a lot going on, but boy, I'm looking
Yeah.
and I see where.
Swim team.
Yeah.
Swim team's doing amazing work, and
And some of
the
those
districts, I think
basketball
there's a relay
players.
team
and-
going to districts, as well as Dave
Oh
Walker.
my gosh,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Impressive, yeah.
Yep,
The
yep,
individual medley, like his, I mean, it was beautiful.
Yeah, that's a big
Yeah.
deal, the district.
Yeah.
District.
Yeah.
That's
He's
huge.
great.
Yep.
Tomorrow.
Got roller school today.
Sections, or yesterday?
The girls
girls
were
did
yesterday
yesterday,
and the boys bowled today. Our girls basketball got beat last night in their first round tournament game. The team they played hit 9 threes in the first half. So,
Wow.
so,
Yeah, it's just not your
yeah.
night.
So winter sports are winding down now.
Yeah.
Great.
Some real success.
Yep.
Okay, so the board is now going to move into executive session. And I want to make clear that the board will not be reconvening in public session afterward to make any decisions or to take any votes. So I need to have a motion to move us into executive
So
session.
moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Steve Kahn,
Yes.
Aida,
Yes.
Sylvia,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
TJ.
Yes.
Okay, and we're in at about 8:30.